Welcome to Fish Chunk, a restricted account series based on Limpwurt's original Xtreme one chunk rule set. I'm sure we're all familiar with the basic premise of one of these by now, so to speed things along, I'll keep the preamble fairly short. Within every chunk or region of 64 by 64 tiles, I must complete the highest level skilling challenges available, including skill capes. Items obtained through random events will count for tasks as well. Progress all diary tasks and quest steps as far as possible. Fill all collection log slots from monsters, minigames and the like. Obtain and equip the best in slot gear for each combat style. And receive all unique items or drops. As for working out the exact list of such tasks, well, that's a job I'll delegate to Source Chunk's excellent website. Now, although the whole Xtreme one chunk thing has taken on a life of its own within the community, I'm very conscious that the label itself is ultimately someone else's creation, and so for this series I've chosen to stick to just the 3 OG exceptions, those being meme drop rates. The classic example here is an Onyx from the gem bag. Unlocks that aren't chunk specific. There's room for interpretation on this, but per episode 1 of Limpwurt's series, prayers and spells do not count as tasks, whereas falling stars do. And lastly, upgrades that don't lead to any new content, such as multiple runes from runecrafting or multiple routes from farming. Outside of those, I'm open to pretty much anything the chunk rolls might throw at me, farming goals and dumb skilling tasks via secondary training methods included. That might mean uploads aren't as regular as some other series, but hey, I'm not intending to weasel my way out of any grinds, so hopefully by the time some of those longer chunks come into play, I'll have plenty of side goals I can set myself to keep things varied, even by lamping skills if it comes to it. So, without further ado, meet Wawalago. Fishing's always been my favourite skill in RuneScape, as well as other games like Final Fantasy XIV, after whose fishing guildmaster my character is named. It was my first 99 back in the day, which naturally I achieved almost entirely on lobsters and sharks in the fishing guild, surrounded by a great community of fellow clueless skillers on my old homeworld. So, of course, when it came to choosing a starting chunk, there was only ever one option. As I make my way to the guild, having emptied my bank of all 25 GP and sold off the tutorial island equipment to afford the boat from Rimington, here's an overview of my tasks. Reach level 15 woodcutting and chop some oak logs, with a bronze axe received from a goblin. Also from goblins I'll need to obtain a bronze square shield, a bronze scimitar, and a red cape. Nothing too arduous there. But what about fishing? Well, with the guild locked behind a level 68 requirement and no access to basic equipment or other spots for now, it might be some time until I get round to reclaiming that cape. But it's nice to have a goal to work towards. And with that, we begin. Now, I was going to include one of those traditional chunk tour type things, but thanks to this yellow shirted gatekeeping ponytailed fellow, we're locked out of most of the interesting bits for now. So here's the quote-unquote highlights of what's left. We can kill goblins in front of the guild, or to the side of the guild. Observe the broken cart. Climb a tower. And wonder why there isn't a sit option on this stool. We're even without basic necessities like a food source within the chunk, meaning I'll be surviving off scraps from random events, at least until I can receive the bronze axe drop and start passively regaining HP while cracking on with woodcutting. As for the logs themselves, it's not as though we can do anything useful with them either. Simple tools like a knife and tinderbox are nowhere to be found, nor can I reach the bank in the guild to deposit anything useful I acquire, so for the time being, we're a de facto UIM. Weapons and armour are in fairly short supply too. Our first upgrade's a bronze spear, but after that the bronze scimitar could be the best we can lay our hands on for a good while.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Meaning we'll be praying for those Quizmaster randoms in the hope of landing a mithril scimitar from a mystery box. And there's the axe. Followed by the square shield. And on the very next kill, the bronze sim. So we're off to a decent start at least, taking only 33 kills so far. One even donated his hat. So with our drip all sorted, time for any % fish chunk. Cue the montage. There's 15 woodcutting, meaning we can cut our first oak logs to finish off that task. No luck with the red cake though. And there it is, 167 kills, only slightly over 8. And we finish off the first chunk at a nice round total level of 80. The chunks won't always be this quick, I promise.
Sometimes foreshadow.
Right, let's look at the map. Another interesting quirk to this chunk are the nature of some of the challenges that surround it. In short, they're pretty daunting. Just to our west are some moss giants, with their roughly 1 in 5k drop of the curved bone, plus access to the higher level herb seeds. Not an issue yet, but given how close we are to the farming patches north of Ardoyne, that's definitely one to watch out for. The moss giant chunk would also give us access to a permanent fire, which, thanks to forestry, means we wouldn't need a tinderbox to train firemaking. Again, not such a problem in itself, were it not for the firemaking skill cape just to our east. Also over there are some magic trees, and a knife in the sorcerer's tower. Oh, and everything so far, from the drop rates to farming to firemaking and fletching, could come into play before we ever get access to a bank. Speaking of which, the chunk to our south, containing the Chaos Druid Tower, looks at first as though it would be our best role at this stage. Simple tasks, with just some willow logs to cut and burn on a permanent fire, clue hunter gear to dig up, and a quest step from Plague City. That is, until we have a way to train thieving, and can get into the tower itself, where, if we haven't ticked it off yet, we'd find the same curved bone drop, thanks to the ogres hanging out in the basement. Like moss giants, but a higher combat level, and worse drops. To the north, meanwhile, we have the coal trucks. Bit of a nothing burger this one. Willow logs to cut, and a step in the Dwarf Cannon quest. And then there's Heminster. Another one that won't really come into play until further down the road, when we can get ourselves a bow, most likely via access to a spinning wheel. But it does give us some chickens, and a fishing rod. Now it took me a while to piece all of these bits together regarding fishing. Although I would of course love to have access to the guild, our nearest route in terms of chunk rolls to unlocking the skill would actually prove a complete nightmare. Here's why. Next to the ranging guild, the NPC Grandpa Jack will sell us a fishing rod for 5 GP. Along the River Doyne, in both the Chaos Druid Tower chunk and the Moss Giant chunk, are a couple of fishing spots. Although the lure options here are no use to us, since we won't have a fly fishing rod until we can get to either Witch Haven or Catherby, we can, at level 25, try to catch pike, leaving just the bait itself. A 1 in 25 drop from farmers. Now, to reach level 68 fishing would require something obscene like 10,000 bait, meaning 250,000 farmers to kill. So, for that reason, I'll have to be very careful with how many evil bob randoms we take, given each one could give us 650 experience in fishing. Rather than trying to rush the skill early then, it is in the long run quicker simply to wait it out, either until we can get to Otto, and use fish offcuts for barbarian fishing alongside bait and feathers, or a proper fishing shop either in Witch Haven or Catherby. With those treats in store then, it's perhaps no wonder this starting point hasn't exactly proven a top pick with other chunk accounts. A shout out goes of course to Ghost Chunk, whose own Fishing Guild Xtreme 1 chunk account predates mine by a good 2 years or so. I've linked his series down in the description. Now dormant by the looks of it, at least at the time of recording. But if you fancy some other series in the same neck of the woods, then among others you may want to check out my crew's Camelot series, Hannibal's Seer Supreme, or of course Xtreme Gnome. Okay, enough putting it off. Time for the roll. Well, it's not the Moss Giants, but nor does it give us very much either. I don't even think I can access this chunk with McGrubber's Wood over to its east, that's just popped up as a rollable option. Anyway, let's give it a look, I suppose. Behind the gate, we of course find Captain Lorgoth, where we can start the Dwarf Cannon quest. Pause. I didn't really notice or highlight it at the time, but I should mention that one tile gap running around the fence in the very southwest corner of the chunk, which allows this part of the Backstorian Falls to be accessible should we roll it, without needing the Moss Giant chunk to the south to be accessible first. So, off Lorgoth sends us to repair his fencing. Now, I should have known better, but the quest helper highlighting only the one railing just outside the chunk threw me a little bit here, so I come back to this step later on after reviewing the rest of the chunk. We have some level 27 giant bats with nothing to collect on their drop table, some coal rocks, for which we don't have a pickaxe, or any lower level ores to start training on for that matter. The NPC Stankers, who hands out a curious drink named a Poison Chalice, a cocktail with a chance to heal or damage the player by varying amounts. So technically, I guess this is our first type of food, albeit an unpredictable one. More interesting for us is its chance to boost either thieving or crafting by 1. No help yet, but in the future, something that could save us a good few hours when trying to complete a high skilling level challenge. Both Stankers and his cocktails are named, incidentally, after an old uni friend of both Modash and the Gowers, who apparently used to concoct and hand out his own drinks by the same name. To the north of Stankers are a bunch of willow trees. And then there's the coal trucks, which would ferry the coal that we can't mine into a chunk we can't reach, trapped behind a level 20 log balance. All in all, a pretty quick chunk then, our only tasks being to reach level 30 woodcutting so we can obtain some logs from those willow trees, and to progress through the next step of the Dwarf Cannon quest until we run out of railings we can reach. As I test the might of my bronze sim against this dwarven guard, I want to make a quick shout out to the One Chunk clan, who helped me out as a guest in their chat while getting the map and everything else set up on the account, as well as to my clan, Osrs Advice, who I've been in for something like 8 years now on my main and UIM accounts, and to which I moved this account over a few days into playing it. Soon realising this dwarf's only drop is regular bones, I went back to chopping trees. Level 20 came soon enough, after which I paused to grunt at some railings, before level 30 woodcutting, to the willows.
Collection log slot completed.
And another roll. Heminster. On the surface, a pretty short task list. For now, it's only telling us to get 1 cooking for a chicken, but that's far from the whole picture with this chunk. Obviously, we now have the Ranging Guild, so yes, as soon as we get our hands on some projectiles, we'll be going for 99. Hopefully by then we'll have something with slightly more useful drops than a goblin, and access to a bank, but who knows. Overall, not a task I'm hugely scared of. As soon as we've made it to 40 range, we'll be able to buy all the arrows we'd need from within the guild itself. Plus, at the end of the grind, the cape will be a nice upgrade for the account, since it acts as an Ava's device, even without having completed the animal magnetism quest. But that's not all there is in the guild. It gives us a tannery as well, and a hay bale where we can find a needle, so all we'd need is thread and some hides to unlock a half-decent method of training crafting. Something I suppose that'd lessen the blow of getting puro-puroed in the future. And then we have the anvil. Landing one of these is nearly always shockingly bad for Xtreme One Chunk accounts. The fact we can't get bronze bars just yet is protecting us from any smithing related tasks, but that won't last forever of course. Especially since we can already get tin ore from goblins. So I'll just be hoping we've got access to a pickaxe, some ores and a way of smelting bars before we end up with something silly like a rune plate body task. But that's all for later. Right now we just need to succeed in not burning a chicken. 3 will be enough, surely.
Sometimes for
Another 3, perhaps?
You're cooking in a burnt pan, you f***ing
And chicken number 7 is the chosen one. Well, nothing else to do here for now, so you know what time it is. Oof. Well, the bank eludes us once again, and it seems like we have our first proper skilling grinds. It might not look like much on paper, but that is, from some quick napkin maths, probably around 2 months spent killing mobs for seeds and farming them. Let's unpack the list. 48 cooking to churn some cheese. Plenty of ways to train that in this chunk, and we'll need the food for combat anyway, so not a problem. But also 61 farming to grow some snape grass. All just via allotment patches, as a de facto UIM with no way of unnoting resources. So expect a lot of inventory management with sacks of vegetables. You may also have caught a glimpse of a level 55 magic task on the list. Well, like I said in the intro, I'm following the chunk picker, albeit with the addition of Limpwert's 3 original exceptions, one of which was that spells and prayers don't count as tasks. So, although I'll be using runes I receive as drops to train magic, I won't be treating this one as a prerequisite for rolling the next chunk. I know there is an option to untick the box for assigning spells as tasks in the chunk picker, but I found that if you do that, then it won't show things like superheating ore as a method of training smithing either. So I'll simply backlog that one if it's still outstanding after the farming grind. Along the way, we'll also need to obtain an iron dagger as our best in slot magic weapon, and some gardening boots as an untracked unique drop from farmers at a rate of 1 in 64. We'll also have our first diary task to complete, being to harvest some strawberries from the Ardoin farming patch at level 31 farming for a medium achievement diary. Looking around, there's certainly a bit more to explore with this one. Up at the top of the chunk we have this random farm building and a mill. Nothing particular of note up there. A farm shop with its usual stock. I'm sure we'll be handing over a small fortune for vegetable sacks and buckets during the course of the chunk. A rather convenient apple spawn. The dairy churn for our level 48 cooking task. And a rather handy range. Outside we have one of 2 farmer spawns in the chunk, alongside a huge field of potatoes that we can pick. The farmer's only level 7 combat, so not too difficult even with our bronze sim. They can be pickpocketed as well from level 10 thieving, but thanks to the master gardener nearby, we definitely won't be lamping that skill. Level 8 prayer off his bones as well. Moving on, we have a field of wheat over to the east, meaning puro should we get to 17 hunter one day. We can't even use the wheat to make flour either, since we don't have a pot to collect it in, so no garden pie to help with the farming grind unfortunately. There's 3 guard spawns to the south, next to another empty building. Occasionally, Knights of Ardoin and warriors will wander up into the chunk here too, but neither has anything besides bones on their drop table. Over in the corner we also have the Servants Guild, should we ever manage to start construction on the account. With our farming tools all purchased, let's see where we're going to be spending a good deal of our time in this chunk. Sadly, the herb patch is completely redundant for now, as we haven't got a way of obtaining any seeds for it at the moment. The flower patch is mostly useless as well, until we can make a scarecrow, which for us will be at level 47 farming when we can grow our own watermelons. So until then, both of these patches will be relegated to growing and raking weeds. A few farmers in and we get our first potato seeds. While those start growing, I'll see if my luck's improving in the kitchen.
Wow, that just tastes of burnt charcoal.
Despite that disaster, we make it to level 4 cooking at last. And with as close to a full inventory of food as I can get, I decide it's time to test ourselves against one of the guards. Might end up saving them till a bit later. Soon enough, one of the farmers gives up his boots, ticking off our first task of the chunk. Now prepare your eyes, pretty bold colour combination I know, but we can just about get away with it. Right, enough dashing around like a madman. Let's set out a bit of a plan for the chunk, beginning with random events. Given how quickly all the chunk rolls have gone so far, I haven't really had time to discuss these yet, but as usual for chunk accounts, they'll have a significant role to play in the account's progress. The maze, of course, is a huge one for us to land. I'll be doing the old trick of using the chest dialogue to stall the timer, maximising our number of elemental runes from each one. Sadly, for this first one, I kept getting potion, bolt and arrow rewards before I got my first air runes, meaning that all my inventory space was filled, and the air runes got sent to the bank, so those will be waiting for me in a future chunk. But in the future, once I've had some of them from guards to start off with, they'll just stack up as normal. We can accelerate our magic training a lot that way. Something we'll definitely need, as our only other source of air runes is a drop of 6 of them at a time from guards at a rate of 1 in 64. After mazes, the next most iconic one has to be the Quizmaster. The Mithril Sim at a rate of 1 in 15 would of course make a world of difference to our DPS in this chunk, versus the Bronze Scimitar that we're otherwise stuck with, so fingers crossed for that. Or at a push, something even better from the rare drop table, so long as we don't get a rune bar, because that would be tragic. Lamps will play their part too, but rather than trying to unlock another skill, instead for now they'll just provide a much needed boost to our farming XP per hour. Essentially, the only skills with meaningful unlocks that we could lamp to within our chunk would also give us a god-awful grind in return. 10 Thieving would let us train to 38 for Master Farmers, letting us grow herbs alongside the allotment patches for some better farming experience per hour, but the Master Farmer has a Torstal Seed on his table, so it would result in a level 85 farming grind instead of 61. Similarly, 15 Smithing would let us create iron weapons and armour to improve our DPS a bit, But then we'd need to get to level 33 for an iron plate body by superheating iron ore dropped at a rate of 1 in 128 from guards. Another way of getting access to better seeds and pieces of equipment is of course through implings, but lamping to 17 Hunter would give us the nightmare of doing Puro all the way to level 89 for lucky implings without a bank to keep any of the loot that we get. So, farming it is. And given that for most of the grind we'll be managing something like 500 experience an hour, each of those lamps is really going to make a difference. To maximise the number of lamps we get, we'll also of course be wanting to complete each of the random event costumes along the way, putting even more pressure on our already pretty crowded inventory. So, we'll be hoping to stay below rate on Leo randoms, where we can make use of the bank deposit box to free up slots for our next costume pieces. An honourable mention goes as well to Bob the Cat. Like I mentioned earlier, the 650 fishing experience a time is something we'll need to watch out for, so that we don't get to 25 and trigger what could end up being a 250,000 farmer grind for bait drops, should we get the River Doyne spots before Otto or a fishing shop. So, alongside the farming, there's at least one piece of side content I'll be keeping track of during this chunk. One little milestone I hit fairly early on is level 7 cooking, where we can start to make baked potatoes. Another handy use for that big field of potatoes in our chunk. Don't ask why I'm using the range up here instead of the one right next to the field, by the way. Blame muscle memory or something. Although the baked potatoes only heal 3 hit points a time, they are plentiful, free, and don't require any inventory management of things like buckets of milk for cheese, so they're going to be a handy food source when working through the thousands of farmers and guards we'll need to dispatch in search of seeds. Speaking of which, we got a bit spooned on receiving our first snapegrass seed early on from farmers. They're meant to be something like 1 in 600 as a drop. And the inventory management situation only gets worse as I try out guards again, fueled only on baked potatoes. Soon, they give us our first air runes, followed by some cabbage seeds. All things we'll want to hang on to, meaning I've got some tough choices to make with other items we might come across. You'll notice, for instance, I've jettisoned the bronze axe by now, so wood cutting's off the cards for the foreseeable future. With those first couple of levels and bunch of skills out the way though, I reckon the account's in a fairly good place for the grind ahead. I've cut things down to just the essentials in terms of runes and seeds, giving us a block of 12 inventory slots to play with when juggling sacks of produce, tools and compost as we work through our planting and composting routine. So with that, I think this about brings an end to our first episode. If you've enjoyed the start of Fish Chunk's journey, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. I don't really have a fixed schedule in mind for videos yet, since between my career and planning my wedding for this summer, my time's a bit limited, but I'm certainly enjoying the account so far, and look forward to sharing more of my progress with you soon. I'll probably stay a couple of weeks ahead of video content on the account, just because of time spent editing footage and so on. So, although I've linked my chunk map in the description, it may end up giving things away for future episodes, depending on when you watch this first one, so proceed with caution. Anyway, enough rambling. Thank you for watching. Fish Chunk out.